Welcome back to my channel, Star Booze.
Well, Doc, how are you? How have you been? Why don't you return to your starting point? From? What happened to you then? You were sucked through a knot hole by someone? Gunsmoke was more than merely popular. It was the TV's most popular show for 20 years. At the center is Marshal Matt Dillon. It provided spectators with roughness, drama, and tales that will stick in your memory. However, even the greatest mistakes happen in shows. One scene as well from Gunsmoke is currently spreading widely. 4. The wrong reasons. That is a blooper. Made it through the editing process somehow, and you can't unsee it once you've noticed it. However, it's not the only secret moment. From the duration of the show, there are additional drama behind the scenes and amusing antics more than you might anticipate. Come along as we reflect on the splendor of Gunsmoke and find the single scene that producers certainly missed. The program that made a difference. Westerns will always be popular. The Gunsmoke was the American epic's dramatic adaptation Western legend, our own Iliad and Odyssey. The Los Angeles Times, Cecil Smith. Gunsmoke began as a drama on the radio in 1952. Dodge City, Kansas, served as the setting in the 1870s. At this time, the American West remained untamed and hazardous. The protagonist was a Marshal Matt Dillon is a lawman. William Conrad provided his voice on the radio. Afterwards, when the program shifted, to James Aries took over the television function. The radio version began airing in 1952 up until 1961. It became a popular favorite of dramas on radio. Despite the fact that it had no initially, sponsors, CBS thought in it and sustained it. Numerous individuals. Gunsmoke was still regarded as one of the greatest radio programs ever produced. Gunsmoke in 1955 turned into a television program. It was broadcast on CBS and remained broadcast for 20 years. The initial each program lasted only 30 minutes. However, the format was changed to 1 hour in 1961. That enabled the program to delve further into characters and tales. Throughout the years, a total of 635 programs were broadcast. That making it the script's longest-running American primetime shows up till the later, Simpsons broke the record. However, in the past, Gunsmoke was incomparable. Indeed, during its second it reached the top of the TV season in 1956, 10 performances, in the United States. Additionally, from 1957 to it was number 1 in 1961. The audience adored the drama, the action, and the manner in which narrated tales of the West. However, the performance was about more than just bad dudes and gunfights. Dodge Life City. The events of Gunsmoke's tale in Kansas, Dodge City. This was accurate. Following the Civil War, the town was packed, many individuals beginning new lives, pursuing dreams, and occasionally causing problems. Marshall was in the center of it all. Dillon, Matt. His role was to maintain harmony in a place where danger lurked around every corner. Dillon wasn't by alone. He received assistance from his deputy officers. Chester Good arrived first, followed by Phecis Hagen later. They were both faithful, but frequently uncertain when Matt wasn't present. Next up came Doc Adams, the community's doctor. He was compassionate and intelligent, although his outdated approaches irritated a few patients. Naturally, there was the proprietor of the saloon, Miss Kitty Russell. She and Dillon were never together, yet displayed as lovers, and they had a close relationship and unambiguous. The majority of Gunsmoke episodes displayed issues arriving at Dodge from the outside. Matt had to leave. Sometimes, the deputies and the municipality had to deal with their own. Tension was increased by these instances, and demonstrated Dodge City's reliance on Dillon, Matt. The performance wasn't only, though serious, there were also humorous moments. Chester, Doc, and Phecis frequently added moments of lightness to counterbalance the drama. That combination gave Gunsmoke a realistic, full-bodied feel. World, not merely a television set, from brief tales to an entire epic. In its initial, Gunsmoke ran for 30 years episodes. At the time, these earlier episodes were later. They were replayed as Marshall.Dillon. The program ran in the UK under A-gun law is a different name. When it was altered, in 1961, the storylines were reduced to one-hour segments. Grew much wealthier. More time was available to investigate the characters' emotions and their way of life. That's one of the reasons. The show went on for ages. It expanded, alongside its viewers. Additionally, even if other westerns arrived, Gunsmoke continued. 30 various western programs were broadcast throughout its run, but none made it as far as Gunsmoke did. By the late 1960s, in reality, CBS intended to call off the performance. It wasn't as well-liked as previously, but the public had something to express. The fans were angry. Even it was reported to Congress, and Babe Paley, William Paley's wife, the president of CBS, explicitly requested that her husband refrain from put an end to Gunsmoke. CBS took action to save it to a new time period. Mondays at 8 p.m., the relocation was successful. The rankings rose once more. For several additional years, Gunsmoke returned to the top 10. It even outlasted other popular Western such as Jones, Bonanza, and Alias Smith. Those early 1973 saw the conclusion of the shows, however, Gunsmoke continued to ride. The last few days and Assalant farewell. In spite of all its achievements, in the end, CBS chose to discontinue Gunsmoke in 1975, but they astonished me with how they accomplished it. Everyone, the actors and producers, didn't even realize the show was coming to an end. There was no official notice from CBS. There was no special farewell or last farewell. Final episode. James Aries, an actor who we didn't, said Marshall Dillon, do a last wrap-up show. We completed the 20th year. We all anticipated continuing for 1, 2, or 3 more seasons. The network never disclosed to anyone that they were considering canceling. Rather, in the profession, the actors and crew read the news documents. Following 20 seasons and 635 episodes, Gunsmoke was executed exactly as that. However, the program had already left its imprint. 15 primetime Emmys were won by it. Honors and maintained a spot in the Nielsen Top 30 even in its last year. That is uncommon for any television program, particularly one that had been broadcasting for 20 years. However, there was more love to come. Following, the 5 TV movies were filmed after the series ended, were created. Fans received a small more time spent with their characters grew up with. Currently, individuals continue to discuss Gunsmoke. It was more than merely a Western. It was included in TV history in America. Comedy, drama, and life teachings at one location. Additionally, with such a legacy, is hardly surprising that followers with sharp eyes continue to capture things that went unnoticed today. Editing. One blooper scene in particular, everyone is talking about a certain the concealed aspect of Gunsmoke's protracted prosperity. Gunsmoke wasn't just any show, you see. It truly was a legend on television. Running between 1955 and 1975, it emerged as the second longest-running television program. Its exciting stories were adored by audiences. Sentimental figures, as well as the ancient Western allure. It brought in new stars while simultaneously granting elderly people significant roles, actors with experience. Even now, fans continue to discuss it and permanently cause. With 20 years and 635 episodes, there are numerous backstage tales that most people are unaware of. Even after years later, the performers and crew still provide information that may surprise devoted followers. From casting narratives to the program had its share of on-set rules, of secrets. Among the main causes for the successful run of the show was James Marshall Matt Dillon was portrayed by Aries, and never went away. Despite the fact that many actors leave shows due to other responsibilities or personal issues, Aries remained from the beginning to complete. Not only as a backdrop, either, he was the star of the show. Even when he'd minor roles in certain episodes, he was the main man at all times. Just Kelsey Grammer was only used once in Grammer's more episodes than Aries' previous visits were frequently brief. The focus was on Recess, John, the secret of Miss Kitty, and Wayne's link. Some admirers think that Matt's role, John Wayne, was the first to be offered Dillon. However, that is untrue. As stated by Warren, Charles Marquise, who oversaw some episodes and was intimately acquainted with Wayne, that never happened. Wayne John, he claimed to reside close to me, and we met at gathered around reviling in his bar TV. He detested television. However, Wayne had a significant impact. He suggested James Aries for the position, along with that guidance altered everything. Next is Miss Amanda Blake plays Kitty Russell. The Long Branch Saloon was owned by her, and appeared in more than 500 episodes. However, there was a mystery surrounding her personality, particularly in the original radio version. The originator of the show, Norman MacDonald, once alluded to her actual position, claiming that Kitty is simply someone Matt has to pay a visit occasionally. That Time magazine said based on the quote that she was clearly not offering chocolate. For sale.bars. Admirers were usually curious about the relationship between Matt and Kitty. Many people hoped for a romantic tale, but the pair never shone one on the screen. Once, Amanda Blake jokingly said, she would love it if Matt said, "Kitty, let us purchase a plot of land and cultivate some beans and children." However, we'd have I Love Lucy in the West. James Aries concurred. I believe they believed you could only leave this far. If you have Matt and Kitty had a romantic relationship on screen, they would then need to get married, and you'd have another program after that. There. In the early years of when radio shows were more prevalent, CBS Television, William Paley, the same individual who kept Gunsmoke alive on television, was in command. He desired a Western for not children, but grown-ups. Other programs, such as the Although, they were entertaining. Lone Rangers were made for those that are younger. Paley desired something more grave, therefore CBS came up with the show Gunsmoke Radio. It featured a darker tone and a more emphasis on adults' themes. A lot of the stories were intense and sentimental. Later, when the show moved television, a few of the first radio actors applied for the same position. Roles. But no one was selected. The creators desired new faces for the screen. However, one voice persisted in the display. Author John Meston. He had composed a large number of early radio shows. When the show shifted to television, he revised those identical scripts, transforming them into the iconic episodes that we are familiar with now. That seamless changeover from radio to. Although it wasn't simple, television was beneficial. Gunsmoke creates a solid base, and the show was sustained by that foundation. Years of development, transformation, and enduring narrative. That powerful, the beginning was only the beginning. As the years passed, the cast expanded, evolved, it gave Dodge even more Heart City. Behind Dodge City's faces, Phecis Hagen wasn't always Ken Curtis. In Gunsmoke's early years, he performed in additional minor parts. Among them was a rancher who failed to pass the episode. However, in episode 8 of season 8 at 13, Curtis presented Phecis to the audience. Hagen, a part that might eventually turn into a favorite among fans. Phecis was witty, devoted, and bursting with character. The persona was in fact modeled after a person From during Curtis's early years, Cedar Jack, a man who fabricated fence posts out of cedar. Glenn Strange, who portrayed Sam Noonan, the bartender, possessed an unexpected past as well. Prior to, he was more well known during his time in Dodge as the monster created by Frankenstein in 3 Universal Pictures following Boris Karloff resigned. He even added humor to the role of the monster in Abbott and Costello in 1948, Meet Frankenstein. However, Gunsmoke ended up being his final endeavor. Lengthy career. Strange died in 1973 from carcinoma of the lung. However, Glenn Strange departed. Beyond TV credits, there's more. His Buck Taylor, buddy, and co-star was awarded him in a very intimate manner. Taylor gave Glenn the name of his 3rd son, demonstrating how much the cast is loved and respected for one another. Off-screen, even Chester Good was portrayed by Dennis Weaver, had an intriguing beginning as well. When he first tried out, he believed he was reading for Matt Dillon's main part. Later on, Weaver remarked, "I stuck my head back, entered the space and asked, 'Are you certain you refuse to have me read for Matt Dillon?' The Chester role seemed ridiculous to him, however, the producers had him in mind. He made a second attempt using a new emphasis which made the sale. Changes, regrets, and secrets that influenced the program. After Weaver agreed Chester's role, things changed swiftly. However, during Matt's tryouts a new issue arose, Dillon. Dennis on screen, Weaver was so endearing that he began to resemble the lead. To correct, the group requested that he provide Chester peculiarity of the body. Weaver returned home, practiced walking with a limp in his backyard, bring it to the screen. It was successful, but it turned into something he regretted as well. He carried that limp with him into every episode. Gunsmoke had to change throughout time. It endured despite significant changes in American society. From the earliest days of television, in black and white to color and between the serene 1950s and the evolving. During the 1960s and 1970s, the program managed to endure, among other things that involved adjusting to expectations of viewers, competition from other performances, and even protests against war. It also succeeded in making a comeback in the 1990s through 5 television-based films, displaying the continued strength of the fan base. Not even the main characters were completely developed immediately. Doc Adams, performed by Milburn Stone. He had no initial name for 16 years. He was wealthy. Backstory. He pursued his medical studies in Philadelphia, was employed by Riverboat. They even knew Mark Twain and were gamblers. However, the authors never offered him an appropriate first name. At last, they allowed Stone made the decision on his own. He selected. The name Galen stuck. Amanda Blake was a member of the cast of Miss Kitty Russell. Years of the show. She received their role because she worked hard to obtain it. When, from the EA radio, she learned that Gunsmoke was leaving, she wanted into TV. She sounded, she said, the producers before providing her with the section. However, she departed prior to the last season. One significant factor was the passing of Glenn Strange, her buddy, the man responsible at her saloon's bar, in relation to which, in addition to winning hearts, it also received prizes. Missed awards chances, as well as the woman who stated no. The performance, writing, and the show's production garnered a lot of acknowledgement. The ensemble, which includes famous figures such as Hank Miller and Burt Reynolds, contributed to the show's 15 nominations for the Primetime Emmy and 4 Golden Globe, gives a nod. Furthermore, 2 TV Land Awards and 2 were won by Gunsmoke. Awards for Western Heritage. Authors from Additionally, the program received appreciation from the Western Writers Guild of American Authors and Entertainers every week. However, even in significant victories, there are hypothetical situations. Amanda Blake might have become Miss Kitty's spokesperson, but she wasn't initially selected. That distinction went Toto Polly Bond, an actress and the spouse of Tommy Bond, the actor from Little Rascal. She was given the position but declined it. Down. Why? Since she would have made greater income than her spouse. With there, the couple is already having difficulties. Polly didn't want to add any more patches, pressure. Ultimately, she declined, and Amanda Blake took over. Occasionally, the popular television stars received their own spin-offs. Gunsmoke has just one. In Producers debuted a character in 1971 in a two-part series called Sally Fergus Episode. Sally was a tobacco user who was 62, chewing tough lady who took care of an injured combatant. The audience enjoyed her, thus they presented her with a show called Dirty Sally in 1974. However, it was short-lived. Nevertheless, star Jeanette Nolan received a nomination for a Primetime Emmy for her function. The small details that added up to a large distinction. The allure of Phecis Hagen wasn't just in the way he walked or spoke, it was inspired by actual events. Based in Ken Curtis Phecis on a childhood acquaintance, Jack Cedar. He made posts for fences. With his humorous yet gritty demeanor contributed to creating one of Gunsmoke's finest cherished figures. Glenn Strange possessed an experience with horror films, yet he became a popular among the saloon's patrons. Barr. Following his death in 1973, he was lovefully recalled by his fellow actors, Buck Taylor in particular. That type of relationship demonstrates how close the cast was. Doc didn't receive initial name up to season 16. Chester possessed a stutter through each scene. Amanda Blake had to plead for her part. Dennis Weaver nearly misread the text. Section. These minor details, some amusing, some challenging, united to construct something enduring. The show was successful. All kind of changes from black and white, taw collar, humor to intense drama, brief short ones to lengthy ones. It even dealt with cultural changes and cast losses. Gunsmoke remained steadfast throughout it all. The strength of the show wasn't merely from the set design or the texts. It originated with the performers, the backstories of their characters and their decisions both off-screen and on. An unprecedented heritage. Gunsmoke was not merely Austern, it was a behemoth of television. For long years it was known as the longest-running, live-action primetime television series in the history of the United States. The program has 20 seasons, which is the longest of any could surpass, up until 2019. That's when Law Enforcement Dedicated Victims Unit began its 21st season and broke the chronicle of Gunsmoke. Prior to then, even the Law and Order had initially bound the document, but it was canceled in 2010. Not until 2022, however, did the Law and Order's initial return with its also the 21st season. Regarding Gunsmoke remained at the written episodes.long, time at the top. It contained more episodes than any other American Prime commercial live-action show until the beginning of, in 2018, The Simpsons passed it. That one period came to an end at this time, and the start of another. However, Gunsmoke continues to rank highly worldwide. As of it was the fourth longest running in 2016 television program in the globe, behind Taggart, The Bill, and Doctor Who. Which do you believe that the Gunsmoke character had the greatest influence on the success of the show, and why? Post your ideas in the leave a comment below, and remember to hit, please like, subscribe, and check back for more. Amazing tales from Hollywood's intriguing past. I'll see you later.